Hello, and welcome to day 4 of 25 days of Christmas comics. I am your host, the Dude Without Fear. Today's Christmas comic we will be reading from is DC Universe Holiday Special 2009. Now, this is a collection of short stories that were originally published in this comic, and each ranging from 6 to 8 pages long. And some of them are just like little one-page stories. I will not be focusing on all of those. I just want to focus on my two favorite stories in this book. And one of them, the first one we will discuss tonight, is about a character that I really like, and I wish that he was more popular and had more stories out there. Because sadly, he does not. He's really never had a long lasting title of his own, and he usually shows up as just, a member of the Justice League. But our first story revolves around the Martian Manhunter. And in this story, titled Reason for the Season, we are on a Christmas tree lot where people would go to buy a real Christmas tree for their home. And the owner-operator has been murdered. So, in his human form, Detective Jones, aka the Martian Manhunter, shows up to the crime scene. And the other police officers that are there, they get this cold feeling whenever Detective Jones shows up. This unsettling feeling about the guy. And he can totally sense that, and he's telepathic, so he can also read their thoughts. But he shows up and meets up with his partner that's there, and she tells him that this is Tony Valdez, and he's the owner of Evergreen Alley where they are. But she doesn't know who owns the 3 slugs in his chest. And the first thing that he asks her is, cash box. Where's that cash box at? And she tells him it's long gone. So he sees that the police are interviewing his helper, a local kid named Kenny, who says that he went around the corner for some coffee, heard the shots on his way back, and there were no other witnesses. So while he's being investigated, she offers an invitation to the Martian Manhunter to their precinct Christmas party that just started a few minutes ago up on Broadway. He thinks to himself, she doesn't understand. She means well, but he can't risk getting close to anybody, and he can't risk exposure. He can't risk exposing who he really is. And while she's just thinking about the Christmas party, he's reading this kid's thoughts, and this kid is the murderer. He sees this kid's thoughts, of his memories of him killing this guy. And so he tells Diane, his partner, that he can't go to the party. He's got work to do. And he goes, after the officer finishes with the kid, he goes and puts his arm around the boy as they're walking out. And he says, the cash box, what'd you do with it? And this spooks the crap out of the kid, and he runs off. And he says that telepathy may help identify the guilty, but psionic evidence is inadmissible in the sovereign state of Colorado. So he's off to find the evidence required. And so he becomes intangible and goes off, and he goes through this like lady's house, and there's just this old lady petting a cat, watching TV, her Christmas tree fully decorated behind her, and he's thinking red and green, this festival's traditional colors. Nothing could make me pine more for my home world. And the red reminds him of the dust of the ground on Mars. And then green, obviously, the color of his people. And he longs for being back home, where even when he was apart from his family and his loved ones, they were always connected telepathically. And so, being here on Earth, being, one of the last of his species, he longs for that. He doesn't have that, and he doesn't have that connectivity here on Earth like he had back at home. And so the kid is in this car, and he's driving away, and Martian Manhunter becomes tangible once more in front of the car, and the car hits him. And Martian Manhunter, who is, very strong and powerful like Superman, the car hits him and just crushes like a can, and the kid goes flying out the window, and the cash box lands on top of him, and he scans the boy really quickly, just to reveal that the reason why he had done what he had done. And it says that Kenny's thoughts reveal he had come to the end of another year with no more hope in it than the one before it. His girlfriend left him, his parents dead or disappeared, friends with more cash in their pockets than he. Little wonder he felt driven to grab onto whatever was close at hand that he could claim as his own. Little wonder he felt so alienated. And then our story takes us to the bar where the precinct Christmas party's at, and Martian Manhunter shows up as Detective Jones, and his partner is so excited to see him, so glad that he came, and he brought eggnog because he heard that that was customary, and they're like, of course it is, where are you from? And he's like, Canada. And they're like, oh wow, that actually explains quite a lot. And his partner gives him a cookie, an Oreo, and he's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I guess this is where he discovers his love of Oreos. And so it ends, and they're talking about the case, and the other police officers and detectives are wanting to know, why he's so good. Tell us how you can do this stuff. And so it ends with, he's surrounded by all these people. He says that he closes his eyes and he can feel the red wind of the Olympus Mons on my face and the oneness of a people all around me, and I know what I have been missing. And this story is cool because he feels isolated and alone, and even though he feels that way, he isn't. He may not have his family here, and he may not have the people that used to be in his life, but he has people in his life now that want to be, but he was too busy pushing them away to accept their offering of love and their gifts of friendship to him. And so he set that part aside of himself to not alienate himself from people who were willing to love him. And I just thought that that was a really cool, touching thing, that even though he feels alone and he doesn't have his family anymore, he has a new family of people that love and care for him and are offering him friendship and companionship that he has been longing for. So just because you may not have the family that you used to have, or you may be away from your family, doesn't mean that you cannot still have that friendship and that companionship around Christmas. Because whether it be your work family or your new friends or whatever, most people have at least somebody that cares about them, and we might sometimes be too selfish to realize that, they may want to spend time with us, and we're the ones that are keeping ourselves at bay. And I just thought that was kind of an interesting tale. Our second story takes place on December 24th, 1944. And we see Sergeant Rock carrying a bunch of bottles of alcohol. And he's kind of just looking down at the ground. It's a foggy morning, and looks very cold. And you can see his breath, and there's a trail of breath behind him. And he's going into this tunnel, and coming into the tunnel from the other side is a Nazi soldier. And they're kind of just both looking down at the ground as they walk, and then they get right beside each other, and they kind of get freaked out, and they both reach for their weapons, and they both wind up slipping and falling. And he drops all of his booze, and they just both land on their butts. And he says, "Blasted ice," and then he kind of just looks and kind of smiles at the situation that they found themselves in. And the Nazi soldier says, "Got a cigarette, Yank?" So they share a cigarette together and share a drink, and they exchange pictures of their loved ones, of their family that's waiting back home for them. And they exchange stories, and they're uh, both military, both come from military families. Both had fathers pass away in the wars previous, and they find that they're not so different. They finish their cigarette and they finish their drink, and the German soldier says, "Sergeant, my orders are to shoot on sight when encountering an enemy, and I always follow orders." And Sergeant Rock says, "Same here." And they both cock their guns, and then you just see gunfire. You see the sound effect of gunfire, and then you look, and they're both just shooting their guns up into the air. And the soldier says, "Merry Christmas, Frank Rock of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania." And Sergeant Rock says, "Un Frieden auf Erden, Fritz." And he's carrying away his booze, and it ends and just says, "Peace on earth." So every time I've read that story, which is probably about 5 times now, it just always speaks to me. And it's just a very small story, almost no words in it, and it's simple but beautiful. And it's just, here are these two opposing sides in the greatest war in American history, the greatest war in modern world history, which is World War II, and they're on opposing sides. And for one brief moment in time, for maybe a couple of hours, they set aside their differences that make them enemies, and they instead focus on what they have in common. And in that small amount of time that they're doing that, they achieve peace, at least amongst themselves. And it's, there's layers to it. It's of course much easier for peace to be achieved among two men than it is among two countries. So it's a lot harder to achieve peace on a countrywide scale like that. But when you just on an individual basis, if you can focus not on what makes you different, but on what makes you the same, then could live peacefully with each other. And I just think it's a very touching story that even in the midst of war, Christmas can bring about peace because of, we've talked about it before, just that Christmas spirit that's in the air. It just can bring out the best in people during this time of year. And I've just really enjoyed that story. So don't have enemies at Christmas time. Don't focus on the things that make someone your enemy. Focus on those things that make that person your brother. And that's all for tonight. So thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you here again tomorrow for day 5 of 25 Days of Christmas Comics. May your day be merry and bright. God bless.